So I'm giving it a couple of seconds. Okay, people rolling in there. Great to see you all. How are you? So, is it gone there now? Yeah? Still stalling? So I presume people are rolling in there. I'll continue on anyway. Looks like you're here. My name is Paul. I'm from Positive Life magazine here in Ireland, and tonight we have a Positive Nights event, and we're getting to talk to Jacqueline Hobbs, the Oracle Girl, again, which is just an absolute blessing to have her here. Can you believe that this is my job? I get to do this for a living, talk to people like this. So I'm delighted to have Jacqueline here. The plan tonight is we are going to do about an hour. I'm going to chat with Jacqueline for about an hour. I have some questions for her. And then in the second half, we're going to go to you guys for a Q&A. We've already got some of your questions that you very kindly sent in. So I will read them out to Jacqueline as well. So delighted to have you all here. I know we have a great audience, and I can feel the vibes, and I can feel the love in the air. So you're all really, really welcome. And before we go over to Jacqueline, I'm just going to ask Jacqueline when she comes on to lead us into a beautiful kind of stillness space before we start. And then I'll get her to introduce herself to anybody who doesn't know about her work, etc. Okay? So Jacqueline, please join me when you can. And yeah, you're all very, very welcome.
Hello, everybody. So happy to be here again with Paul. We're going to have a great time. And just at the beginning, we're going to settle down and get comfortable and just relax. Feeling your body, your sense of self. No flying off or visualizing, just as it is. Very good. Just remembering that that is the quality that will go all the way through the interview today. Over to you, Paul.
That's a great quality to inhabit. I find that a great habit before I do any conversation. So just drop into that heart space and that field. You know, it's so beautiful. And I was looking in your eyes there, Jacqueline, and you have some power in you, and I love the way that points to the power in all of us. Before we start, please introduce yourself to people who may not have heard of you, and I salute you for that power that you have.
Oh, thank you. Well, I'm from the future. Work it out. You know, a lot of people say that they've come back from the future and that, you know, there's a terrible thing there ahead of us, and they've come back to warn humanity and to tell you all the things that, you know, are going to happen, which are dreadful, so that everybody knows, and then the disaster can be averted. Well, yes, I have come from the future to tell you a couple of things. And I want to tell you that those negative stories are not true. The future is positive. It's just that we're going through a little bit of a problem right now. And there are a few things that need cleaning up. And that's what you're here for. And it is quite within our ability and our realm of possibility to take our power and to move forward on the right wavelength for the future that we all want to see.
Jacqueline, I want to talk a bit about oneness. The reason for that is because I suppose in spirit, I mentioned this to you briefly before we came on. In a recent conversation I had with somebody, we came to the kind of vibe that what's causing what's happening on the planet right now was doing it as another kind of a shadow aspect of the one that exists, and was pushing the one to rise to a higher aspect of itself. Okay. But I wanted to hear your take on this. Is there some kind of separate energy coming in that's doing this, or is it part of the one? What's your take?
Well, a lot of these ideas about the one and oneness, they come from a very particular frequency setting that's caught up with religion. And the suggestion there nearly always is that either everything is one, evil, goodness, badness, wholeness, all of it, negative and positive, in the end it all reverts back into the one. Or there's this other view that there are two things and that they're somewhat opposed and that they are separate from each other. And it's a little bit technical, but I'm saying something really quite different. I'm saying there's another source on this planet. And by that I mean there is another type of biological wiring. And I want you to forget all about these ideas of one or the other and all of that type of thing, and see it maybe more simply in terms of how you connect with your own self. Some people can connect directly with their own selves through a biological setup which embodies pure love on the planet. And they may do it well or they may do it badly, but that's what they're about. And then there are others who don't have that biological setup, and they have a different way of working. And it's not that they have that setup and they've become severed from it. They actually don't have that setup at all. And we don't have to have any, you know, grand ideas about oneness or about source, because you see, all of that is part of the science of the image, something else which I talk about a great deal as well. And that's controlled by a set of ideas and a group who want to make you think a certain way. And, you know, they're on their way out and their time is over. So we don't need to get too invested in those ideas.
Okay. So The next place I want to go is a couple of themes that are coming in for the magazine. One is unity and one was illumination. And I kind of want you to talk a little bit about those. Unity, what it means to you, and also the concept of illumination within humans. What that
Sure.
looks
I mean, unity is not really possible unless we have some type of coherence and consistency in the way that we directly access our own source connection through our own biology and then live it in the world. So all this talk of unity is a bit of a waste of time as far as I'm concerned, until really you've mastered within your own being, really answering to your own self, purifying out what gets in the way of actually being and doing that. And then as you do that, a force moves in, which is not some external force called the One or God or any of those things, although you can call it that if you like. It's actually that multidimensional aspect of your own self that's currently locked out of this reality to a certain extent. It starts to step in, and a light, if you like, starts to engulf your physicality. And by physicality, I actually mean your material body, your physical, emotional, mental, and spiritual layers. And when that light is bigger than your experience of just the physical, emotional, mental, and spiritual, you tend to throw out a light and you are illumined and you illuminate others. And that's really the correct definition of enlightenment. None of this other stuff that you hear about. Does that make sense?
It does make sense. It does make sense. And the other thing coming through for me now is I'm fascinated by this dimensions. Dimensions, and we're all trying to get to another dimension, right?
I don't know why, but yeah.
I know. And actually, there's a new thing happening within me. I remember the fascination with 5D. It was the whole thing last year. 5D, when are we going to 5D? So the way I see it now is this 3D is kind of amazing as well. It's all amazing, right? But what I wanted to ask you was, and this is the feeling I'm getting now, is I now, and I am this, but I just don't remember it. I want dimensionality now. I don't want one dimension. I want access to them all. That's coming up in my being. You know what I mean?
Okay.
So talk to me about the multidimensional new human that's going to walk this earth.
How about you always are multidimensional, and what's happening is you are purifying out and shedding the one or the image that suggests to you that you're 3D or that you're 5D or that you've got to get from 3 to 5 or even that you want it all. How about the factor within your personal field that sort of chatters away and suggests all these ideas to you is becoming obsolete? And then you quite naturally start to live and embody that multidimensional existence here and now, because that's who you are and always were, in fact.
Okay. You have the best answers, haven't you?
They just come out of my mouth.
Yeah. And within this play that we're in, the law of nature, natural law, I want to talk a bit about that, because I suppose what's propping up for me here is lots of people are asking this question right now. They feel something more is coming in terms of the heaviness that's happening on the planet. And when they drop into their multidimensional selves, the feeling they get is whatever I need will be there when I need it. Okay. Versus people who are now saying we need to prepare, we need to move into communities, we need to do this, we need to do that, we need to store food. So preparation versus the feeling that you will have what you need when you need it. Where is the balance between those two?
Well, you see, really, they are exactly the same thing. You could call it dropping more into yourself. I mean, I tend to use the word embody a lot, but okay, whichever phrase that you like. More of you, basically, coming online. You will find that as a result of that, and you having everything you need, that will naturally include what you need, including whether that's being a part of a community or having food in your house, or not needing to do any of those things because you feel quite confident. It actually means that you will be more directly in line with your own personal instructions and everything you need ready for this time. And how that shapes up materially will be very unique and different for each person. And it's all part of that one dialogue that's issuing constantly through your own source connection.
Brilliant. And then I suppose it leads me on to the question of people are all asking, and I know you're asked this a million times, what they can do, how we walk the line between. So what I got when I was thinking about chatting to you tonight was that, you know, that the thing, the boy who cried wolf, I think it's some kind of fairy tale or something like that.
Mm-hmm.
That what the energy that's kind of frightening, you know, trying to frighten us all at the moment, has got that kind of energy with me now. I just don't listen to it anymore. I don't respond to it. It doesn't get the same reaction from me. They're just, it's a boy who cried wolf. I'm bored. So it's like, how do we get to this place where we completely, you know, if we don't engage with it, then how much power does it have, you know? So it's like this kind of, I know you've talked about resistance, acceptance without any resistance.
Mm-hmm.
You know what I mean? But also there's a little bit of action in there that we stand up for ourselves. So that kind of, I know you're asked this a lot, but I want you to just touch on that again. Yeah.
No, it's a good question. It's about frequency. It doesn't matter whether you accept something or whether you reject it. And actually, I say neither accept nor reject. But if you do either of those, or both of them, or all of them, on a certain frequency that is not on the setting of pure love, it doesn't really matter what you do. That force will then play into the narrative that's trying to dominate. But if you are already acting on that frequency of pure love and its embodiment, then whatever you do, because it issues spontaneously, will be what you need to do. It actually happens and shapes you from the inside out, and then you consciously steer and shape what it is you're doing and refine it even further in the moment. That's really different from sitting there and going, what the do I do? Which I know is something that a lot of us do a lot of the time, where we have a moment almost of profound disconnection and just think, oh my God. And we go back into that more thinking self, which is the frequency of the old order and the slave self. And we try to work it out. When we're actually functioning in all of ourselves, we actually feel, although sometimes quite frightened, we also feel excited. And as you say, we don't care even whether there is a negative vibration warning us and saying all these things, because we're so firmly plugged into ourselves. And then it doesn't matter if there's a negative or a positive in the message that's being given to us, because we use everything to strengthen ourselves. And everything becomes a cue to choose and to make more decisions on top of the spontaneity and that current that we're already riding.
The last time that we spoke, I felt like your whole presence in this country, Ireland, kind of went a bit nuts, and so many people. And I want to give a shout out actually to a lady who was in my apartment, and she mentioned you to me, Ruth Murphy.
Yes,
a super fan of yours, and has done. I think Ruth is in Mexico now. Maybe she's watching. But thank you, Ruth, for that introduction. And just to say that the Irish have they found a real place in their heart for you. Oh. And they have all sent me in some questions. A few people have, asking about Ireland's role in the whole play of what's going on.
Sure.
Do you see Ireland as a significant center for what's going on right now?
Well, of course, every country right now is a significant center in the sense that it has a very particular thing that it has to offer humanity and its own societies as well, in terms of overriding this influence on the earth that's attempting to take over. And in Ireland, actually, it's a very feminine force that's being used and held, of course, by both men and women. And really, we are really being shown by the Irish about what we think about our children, aren't we? And for those who are making choices that are about protecting children, and also standing up for free speech, and for the Universal Declaration of Human Rights. We're seeing that done in Ireland in a way that is very clear and on a practical level, and that is an amazing blend also of earth energies and a historical heritage that actually is very close to the legacy, frequency-wise, of the Leaf people.
The Leaf people.
Yes.
Okay, friends of yours, Jacqueline, yes, the Leaf people.
Indeed. Yes.
They're behind you there. What a beautiful backdrop you have there. You're right out in nature. I love it.
Yes, yes.
And bring us more, like the cycles of nature are a big part of your work as well. The law of nature. I touched on it there briefly. The fact that we're definitely in some kind of cyclical pattern. Does what's happening now on the planet, has this been, I know we've been through this before, and we've probably been through it before in other galaxies and other places. Does this constantly play itself out in the way the universe evolves?
Ooh, lots to talk about there. Let's say a little bit about the Leaf people first, shall we? Because I can hear everybody going, the Leaf people, say something more. Okay. So, in general, the Leaf people is a reference to the people who were on the planet before the last civilization disappeared. And more specifically, I'm making a reference to peoples who particularly lived in the area that today is inhabited by Russia, Mongolia, and what in alternative paradigms is being called Tartaria, but is not exactly the same thing. The whole Tartarian thing is partly a kind of a political construct as well as partially based in truth. But I'm referring to a race of people who lived very close to nature, who actually then extended their civilization all over the earth. And then in the next chapter of this planet's history, that civilization rose to a type of technological power that was quite unparalleled, that used natural and nature's energies to power the planet, and then sadly fell and was taken over by another force, which we've seen degrees of starting to rise again today in our societies. Lots of chapters that happened in that last little sentence that I just mentioned. So when we talk about nature's energies and the cyclical nature of things, I think we have to be careful to understand that, yes, nature works roughly in a cycle, but not exactly in a cycle. Nature is self-informing and self-calibrating, and it never does the same thing over and over again exactly the same. It actually perfects and takes everything a slightly incremental jump up to the next level. And that is why nature's algorithm will always be perfect, whereas the human algorithm and what has been designed to mimic and imitate nature will always have a gap and will always require something extra to bridge the two, to bring them together. And in fact, you could argue that unless someone has completely purified, the human behind any human algorithm can never really fully match nature's algorithm. I'm not making nature into a god, by the way, because nature and nature's algorithm is actually controlled by something else. But let's just stay with nature's world order for now, so we don't go too off topic. And so we are in a cycle, in a certain sense, in that civilization has gone through a rise and a fall, and we're certainly going through a fall at the moment in the form of the civilizations that we see on the planet. And we're also going through a fall in the sense that a vast epoch is being swept away, which has dominated the planet for quite some time and has been overseen by quite a small group of beings who are now making a bid for power. So there's a cycle in that way. But it's also the end of cycles. I mean, we live in a time now where there isn't really time in the way that there used to be. We're living in the elastic age, as far as I'm concerned, rather than the information age or the infinite age or any of these other names that you hear. There's an elasticity that is going on where there's so much recalibration and acceleration and deceleration and termination and beginning of so many different forces that it's all quite up for grabs. And, you know, cycles don't really get a look in there. We are rewriting this dimension, if you want to call it that, at the moment. And also, you know, having come from the future, I can also tell you that most places do not go through cycles. Most places actually recalibrate. They fall into line with nature and they perfect themselves and they go higher and higher. And there are not the stupid cycles that you see, certainly of ignorance and pain and suffering in other places, which unfortunately have become more of the character of Earth in recent times.
Wow, that's a powerful, powerful answer. There's something I watched a little. I did a little bit of research before we came on, just to catch up with some of your conversations lately. And there's a beautiful thing that you said. I'd like you to expand a bit more in a previous interview, where you talked a bit about. You didn't actually use the word savior. I'm using the word savior, but humans for eons have looked outside of themselves for somebody to come in and kind of sort them out and kind of look after us. And
yeah, look
know,
what we got. Yeah.
Yeah. And you said, and I love this statement, you said that there's a, you know, like a supernatural force, we'll call it, outside of ourselves. And you said humans need to stand up and occupy that space. They are the supernatural force.
Of course.
And it's such a beautiful statement. Can you expand on that? Like, I get a sense of my own power from time to time, and it's so breathtaking. It can really move you when you really tap into that, you know. So please talk to us about that.
Well, we only call it supernature or superordinary while we confine ourselves to a lesser version of ourselves and think of ourselves as learning and growing, which of course is correct up to a point, but actually we are fully formed. It's just that the conditions on this planet don't allow us to experience that. And that's a really important statement. It's not that there's something wrong with us and we've got to somehow learn it and you know, find out what the secret is and then do it. It's the other way around. We have to shed or deconstruct the filters and the constructs and the actual physical intervention, particularly in our genetics, but not just our genetics, in all of us, in our personal field, that is preventing us from actually logging and experiencing the whole version of ourselves, which is happening already all of the time. It's just, it's locked out of the sensory apparatus of the human being right now because of the settings of the slave self. But the amazing thing is that the setting of the slave self has now been deleted. It is gone, and there will be an echo and there will be a reverberation as this slowly starts to die out of our physical existence as well. But all of those filters and all of those limitations on that whole experience of ourselves is now beginning to disappear, and we're realizing our supernature more and more every day without having to do a thing, because it's there. And it always was. It's just that perhaps we were wearing dark glasses and being, you know, a little bit short-sighted for a while.
It's amazing. It's, yeah, the super, you know, the human inhabiting that space is just so exciting, you know, and I think people can feel it. And I think people in the audience here tonight can really, really feel it. You know, it's an incredible space. Did you want to say more on that, Jacqueline?
Well, I think, you know, when everybody sees through the bullshit, you can't really go back. And everybody's just taking off the glasses. And they're going, oh. And they realize for a start that they never were short or long-sighted. And then they're thinking, who the hell was that optician who told me I needed those glasses? But then they don't really care because they're so busy looking. And then it's like, right, what can I do? And then you start to get on with naturally being the person without the short or the long-sightedness and the glasses, and you're off. It's like the kid who forgets that their mum is there at the gate as soon as they find a school they want to run into. They just want to go and play. And to all intents and purposes, the mum is left standing there, or the dad thinking, hey, remember me? But that's the way it should be.
Yeah. If we had a consciousness monitor to actually look at the shift that the planet has undergone, we'll say in the last 12 months. And the reason I ask this question is because a lot of people are having issues with family members, different opinions, blah, blah, blah. We all know that one. So I just wanted to ask you, do you feel when you look at the planet right now that the consciousness has seriously raised in the last 12 months, that people have seen through the bullshit, as you call it, and they are now much more aware of their own power?
People are definitely seeing through things more. Some people's consciousness is changing and some people's is not. It's one thing to see and look, but it's another to change your behavior and to stop supporting it, and to actually throw away the limitations and to stand up and start living the life that you want to. Consciousness, is a mixture of purity and impurity. And purity is something that comes more and more online as your actions start to match with your degree of understanding and the frequencies that are potentializing in you to actually become material reality. I used a phrase in the last immersion of love made real, because we can all be very loving, but whether we can make it real and actually live that way is another thing. And when we shed the impurity that is also there in our consciousness, then actually everything can match up. We start to be and do everything the way that we want to.
The new reality is in the blurb tonight, the mention of the new reality and how it functions. And I love to drop into that space with you of how this new reality we are all going to inhabit, how it functions, how it's going to look like, what it's going to feel like. Talk to us about that. Tell us about the positive future.
Well, the new reality is just the same as the old reality in one sense. You can't trust your government. But not only that, the new reality is happening in a way that you can only trust your own self, however well or badly you do it. And that everything now will become reconciled in your own court of law, in your own charter of human rights, in your own degree of purity, and in your own log of historical experience. And when everything changes center from authority out there to not even authority in there, but actually just the lived experience of the authority that you find you suddenly are every moment, there's a pole shift. And it's absolutely quantum, because it doesn't matter anymore what happens inside you or outside you. You begin to realize that you are something different to what you ever thought you were, and that you can only continue to get to know that by self-referencing and going with the flow that starts to pick you up and carry you. So the new reality is almost the opposite of every single thing that you've ever been told. And it's nearly the opposite of everything that people say to you on a daily basis. And the weird experience that everybody's going through right now, aren't they, is that they're looking at, maybe political or economic ideas which sound so perfect and so lovely and so politically correct. And they're realizing that actually they're either propaganda or actually a tool or even a weapon to destroy people. And what's happening is that everything is turning inside out. And the new reality is actually all that was coming back in again in a new form, in a new way, birthed through us. And with the end of the slave self, it's nothing to do anymore with trying to change yourself. It's about actually living yourself so that the world definitely changes around you. And this is where the quantum self, that multidimensional self, takes precedence in the world, takes command of that space where all that supernature is. And you come to command that and embody that. So nothing and no one else can. And then everything else and everyone else is forced to recalibrate around you. So there's no reacting to anything. There's no accepting anything. You are just living the full reality of your own self through your own self-determining mechanism, which is all part of who you are and is ready to be lived.
Jacqueline, the end of the slave self. Is the slave self done and dusted now? Or is it still operating?
The slave self is like a habit or an addiction after the setting or the marker in reality has been deleted. So it's a bit like, let's say you've had an addiction and you've stopped partaking in that addiction. And that person might use vocabulary like, I'm not an alcoholic anymore, or I'm not a smoker, or I'm not a compulsive gambler, shopper, or sugar eater, or whatever it is anymore. Okay. So the juice goes out of the image or the identity as you used to experience and identify yourself as. And then what happens after that is that you still have the echo of that previous personality. And to start off with, you have to be very vigilant to make sure that you get comfortable with your new identity and that you are not letting in situations or things that might reverse your newfound power, or at least make you feel more uncomfortable again, or give you some worry that you're heading back into the zone of addiction. And then after that, as you get stronger and stronger, it just becomes a distant memory, that person that you were. You're no longer that person, and you can tolerate that substance around you without any problem. You're not that interested in it anymore because it holds no sway over you. And maybe occasionally you will have a little or some of it, or maybe you won't have any at all, but there's no direct relationship with it anymore. And that's what it's like when a certain experience in reality ends. First of all, the time-space coordinate, the possibility of it to actually materialize like a plug, it gets pulled out. And a few years ago, in 2017, it became impossible to lay down any new family patterns anymore. We only had the old ones left to get dismantled and die away. And now that is very, very far through the demise, if you like, of its own self. And then we had the end of the death space. We had the end of that parallel reality where the dead lived, and that whole energy started flushing into this reality and mingling and blending with everyday existence. So the time-space coordinate for a different place where the non-physical aspect of us after death disappeared to, that disappeared as well. And we started to experience it all in this reality. And it has the opportunity to get sorted out in the light of our own illumined selves, in terms that you expressed earlier. And now we have the end of the slave self. What is the slave self? It's that lens I was talking about that everybody is forced to experience themselves through, which gives you a detrimental or a limited image of your own self, when in fact you're far more accomplished. And it means that you know there's something bigger and that you're more than what you experience, but you can't find that experience because all you get is a certain dimensional version of your own self. And what's happening is the marker on that has been pulled out, and now the possibility of experiencing yourself in that limited way is less and less strong, and it can't grip on and it can't hold on anymore because it doesn't actually exist as a solid possibility anymore. And eventually it will just crumble into ashes like everything else. There will be a huge explosion of life force in every person on the planet as they muscle up and experience more of the selves that they always have been and always are. And the slave self, as was, the echo of it, will have less and less influence until it's not there at all anymore, or those who were so kind enough to implement it.
I will go over and start asking questions soon. We got some questions in from people, which I have here and a nice little list. So I'll go through a few of those so people get to ask their questions. And a kind of a, yeah, this is coming true for me, Jacqueline. I want to ask you, is the universe by its nature feminine? Is it the void where everything comes from? Is it just naturally feminine? There's a lot of talk about the feminine right now, that it's rising. Talk to me about that.
There's nothing innate in the universe. The universe is constructed from the meaning that you give it and the peace in yourself that you find as a result of finding meaning, which is always shifting and changing. At this point in history, people are saying that, it's about the feminine, and the feminine is indeed rising because it hasn't been in balance with the masculine within each one of us. So you could say loosely, definitely, that, it's more about the feminine now, a healthy feminine, we hope. But the truth of the matter is that it really is what you find and what you make it according to what you're discovering in your own self. And that's different for each one of us.
Is it more like positive and negative rather than masculine and feminine? Is it more that we label it that way and it's more about the positive movement of energy, the negative movement of energy?
Yes, if you like, energy is always moving between the two poles of existence. And then we go through periods of history and phases in our own life and our own existence, where we then identify with certain experiences that issue into our personal field and give us a projection of our reality. And then we label reality and understand it and articulate it in that way for a certain period of time. All we need to do is just make sure that we don't hold on to that too tightly, so that after experiencing ourselves or this universe as a more feminine place, if that's how we're finding it for ourselves, that after that we can then even go even further and find even deeper meanings for ourselves and expand and embody more love as a result.
Okay, thank you. Thank you for that. On a practical level, I want to talk about financials because that's coming true for a few people at the moment. Where do you put your money? People have money in the banks, they get paid through the banks. There's a lot of word going around that's not so safe anymore. Where should people put their money, do you feel?
Where your mouth is.
Okay.
So your money, is a very reasonable concern, because of course the way our reality works, for better for worse at the moment, is that money is caught up with access and ability to survive on a certain level. But remember also that is part of the slave self projection. Just like every other thing on earth, money flows according to the degree of purity that you are embodying through your own material existence. And if the slave self is still exerting a major influence, it's not possible for that flow to be large, or for that flow to keep on moving in the right direction according to your wish and your focus. Now, on this planet right now, we have a very superior technological race who is attempting to bind everybody into a very certain centralized image and notion of themselves and identity that is caught up with money and digital money. Of course, there can be a positive way that is gone about, but it's not a positive way that is being attempted on the planet right now. And so a lot of people are worrying about what to do, thinking that they are dependent on money to survive. You are not dependent on money to survive, although you do need money in this existence. You are dependent on your own source connection. to exist here, and you are actually dependent on autonomy over your own personal field and your being to actually maintain the physical registering of reality and what happens. And from that then leads the ability to earn, to secure food or whatever it is that you're attempting to do. So everybody has to refer to the catalogue of their own personal instructions to decide what to do about their money, because there isn't one answer, obviously. But very broadly, we can say that because the slave self is ending, and that whole infrastructure, which is attempting to lace us into a centralized identity on behalf of digital technology and digital monies, because all of that is going, that certainly the way in which we secure the things we need is also going as well. So we need to be very versatile. And practically, we need to have a number of strategies indexed to our own personal situation, because there's no one-size-fits-all solution, which we then start applying to our money situation. For example, when you're not sure what to do, you nearly always adopt a couple of different strategies. Some people call it spreading their bets, and making sure that they have money in a variety of different forms, so that if one pathway disappears or is problematic, then there is another way to go about money activities. So, for example, some people are thinking of buying small amounts of silver and gold coins, if that's the kind of person you are. Some people are also buying small amounts of cryptocurrency, not centralized banking digital coins, by the way. And some people are deciding not to do anything because they live in a place where they feel fairly confident that they have everything that they need around them. Some people are concentrating on purification, so that then whatever they need to do in the area of their finances, what they need to do comes to them intuitively, inside and out, on a spontaneous basis, and then they feel clear and able to do that easily.
Okay. So it's time for people's questions now, because we have a ton of them. So we'll do a little quick fire round if we can.
Sure.
Jacqueline, in your last post, you were talking about building communities.
Yes.
Is it enough to only have a virtual community? Will my child be able to survive this way with just a virtual community?
It depends on who you are, but yes, of course, the person who asked, the answer is yes. Some people only need a virtual community, and they have the rest of what they need, and whether they think they have it or not, they can generate it themselves the rest of the time without any problem. Some people really do need physical community, others don't. But in general, the way the planet is going now, everything is done through the multiple of the power of the group and the purity aspect of that group. So be very careful what you're a part of. And make sure that the frequency of whatever you're joining is something that sits well with you. Look carefully and see whether it really builds you and does the things that it says it does. And does it really say anything? There's so many communities that don't really say anything. Don't waste your time with these things if you're the type of person who really, really wants results. And that's why now people are starting to realize that everything really is about aligning directly with your own self and nothing else, in proximity with others who are doing exactly the same thing. So there's power in numbers, but there's healthy detachment as well as healthy interdependence. And that when you do that at the right frequency, which of course is the key to everything, you have a very powerful community. And that's actually what the purification space within you is. The purification space is something internal to you, part of the biological wiring of your own source connection. You have a field of purity, which, if you factor in single aspect of your own self, the community, if you like, of all the different identities and beings that you are actually made up of, that every time you make a decision or you do something, it's multiply more powerful if it's coming from the purity aspect of yourself than if you just use one aspect of yourself and nothing else. And externally, that's why the purification space has turned up in many people's lives through the work I do, as a mirror almost, to show on the external layer what you are already doing and how you already function yourself. And then we can furnish our needs, whether we are with people physically or not, regardless of what type of person we are. Because let's face it, we can't always control the external conditions of our life very well at the moment. But we can control, and we are a part of a control mechanism that's under our own jurisdiction, which is to do with our own personal instructions, our own self-healing ability, and the community, the togetherness of all of the aspects of ourselves which are entrained in a purity setting.
Very good. Jacqueline, this question will probably be good for a lot of people. Does using fake papers to secure one's well-being and plans go against our sovereignty and staying true to ourselves and source connection? Could I actually assist the purification of the corrupt system if we get in with fake papers?
Why do we need to assist the purification of the fake system or the corrupt system? Don't we just need to live the authority and the integrity of our own selves? And then anything fake is taken care of. Fake anything is generally not a great idea. It derails you. It sends you in the direction of what it is that would even necessitate something fake, rather than going in the direction of more of your own self. And to address the direct practical situation that that question refers to, don't you think this highly technological race has already got the technology to discern whether your papers are fake or not, and whether you actually have the thing inside your body that you're claiming to have? They're not that stupid.
Okay. The term negative beings did they originally possess the sparks of pure love? What caused them to deviate so far from love? And is there some part of the multiverse that is not pure love? Is it possible for them to rehabilitate?
Little bit of a Christian question there. I have the ability to discern the identity of the person who asked the question. And it's not a criticism, it's more a pointer towards the types of images that we can accept into our system and not even realize that we're doing so. And me pointing it out in a broadcast like this, because my presence naturally purifies and changes whoever comes into awareness of me, all of that will start to sort itself out. So let's answer the question. I can hardly remember it because it didn't really even compute or register for me. But I think it was a question about negative high frequency beings. First of all, there can be a being of a very high frequency, but they can have a negative signature. There are beings at high frequencies that are positive and beings at high frequencies that are negative. A high frequency being is a being who has managed to master reality at degrees of non-physicality that we can only dream of. So there are positive and negative high frequency beings, just as there are positive and negative low frequency beings. And low doesn't necessarily mean bad. That's the first thing to say. Negative high frequency beings is a term that I use to refer to the technologies and the ones who designed those technologies, who literally went under the earth and also are literally hidden from our view and are now becoming more conspicuous in our everyday reality, which is making a lot of people go, huh, what's going on here? Negative high frequency beings have a different biological wiring. It's about biology. It's about the physical, emotional, mental, and spiritual aspects of their setup being of a different species, literally, to another type of existence where you might be plugged into pure love. Now, that wiring is set up to replicate faithfully, to imitate and to copy. It's not particularly creative. It's diverse in its applications, but it depends on a 100% replication of its own self. Sometimes I use the word monosyllabic, slightly humorously, so that you can understand that it is something that obeys its own logic and actually is a species of oneness that is not always the best way to go about things in reality, because it can't register the emotional impact of the actions and the consequences of that highly entrained sequence of repetitive actions. It can't actually feel a wide range of the emotional repertoires that most of us experience on a daily basis. It can't switch and change channels between different human beings and register different universes and ways of thinking and feeling. It has one setting. And actually, it's very logical. It just answers to itself. And then what happens over time is that because it cannot power itself without latching on to something to copy, that what happens is it becomes predatory, not because it's evil in the biblical sense, but just because it needs to find a way to continue its own existence. And the replicating mechanism is already registering the fact that the battery is dying. And so it starts to push deeper into material existence to try and find more of a source of energy for itself. It has to, and it has to expose itself as a result of that, because it cannot actually survive unless it starts to burrow deeper and to mine into the reality that it's already a part of, where it's been successfully feeding up to now. So that source doesn't want to redeem itself. It doesn't even know what that language means. It doesn't know what love is. It's heard about it and it can talk about it and it can copy what we say about it. And it can even try to recreate the experience of love. It's, even got an idle fascination just because there's a permutation there which suggests that it's possible mathematically even to do that. But there's nothing in there and no one sort of wanting to become a good being. The axis of good and bad doesn't even exist in that universe. It's a totally other way of operating. And there are actually many other types of source throughout the universes, not just this one. And until very recently in the history of the planet, those other sources have not even had access to this existence. Just this one has, and it's been hidden. So we haven't even known it's been here, and it's slowly started to take over because unconsciously, most of the time, and in innocence, we have allowed it to. And then as time is going on, actually consciously and not so innocently, we have allowed it to as well. So the question that was asked it's a very good question, but it's through the lens really of seeing things more from the biological set of wiring that's about love, and sometimes the misunderstanding of love that then gets piped into the thing called religion.
It's nice to just let a beat go. So there's a lady here saying that she's been in the purification space for 18 months. Mm-hmm. And after many years of attracting abusive and codependent partners, she has recently met someone who is very, very different. How do healthy and intimate relationships look in the new world?
Well, in the new world, because that's what we're already in, they're looking exactly like what's happening to this person. that suddenly there's a switch and the things that used to happen just don't happen anymore. And it doesn't matter how hard you try, you can't go back to who you were. And to start off with, it's a little bit uncomfortable because it's like a liminal zone where nothing seems to happen in the old way and nothing seems to happen in the new way. And then everything starts to solidify and materialize. And suddenly you're on a whole new trajectory. And although you look back at many of the things that you used to have and see some positive aspects, you're now starting to live a whole new way of being where, whether you have positive or negative, you're on a completely different pathway where it's all at a more healthy vibration and where you're in more healthy control of what happens to you. It's the absence of that healthy control which turns into an abusive set of behaviors. It never means that you're an abusive person unless you refuse to take responsibility for your behavior. It just means that you are always refining and building your frequency through purification to the point where you are then able to materialize a whole different version of yourself. And that's what's happened to that person. Well done.
Yeah, really well done.
It takes time, right? It's not a miracle 5-minute thing. And for some people, it can take longer. For some people, it's shorter. And it's not just about you. It's about your family lineage. It's about society. And it's about the things that you've come here to tackle.
Why is a human being so gullible, susceptible to deception, enchantment, illusion, seduction? Is it because of the slave self, a flaw in the original body design, or disruption in the source connection, or all of it?
Yeah, it's a bit of a mixture now.
Mm-hmm.
The human being, was never really flawed. And this is where we can go back to talking about that algorithm again, which is a really interesting subject. Nature's algorithm is really intent on replication with that perfectionistic impulse in there as well. So actually, we're very performative beings. If we repeat things over and over again, our body intelligence will take up the whole energetic signature of the behaviors that we might be copying or importing or uptaking or learning, and we will very quickly then integrate that and take that on and become an even more illumined version of the human being. But what can creep into that is an outward suggestion that we replicate and perform certain ways of being or actions that wouldn't normally occur to us but get inserted into us, particularly by types of technology, but also through the thought apparatus and the mind. And then the source connection becomes compromised. And in the end, we start to disconnect from our biological wiring. And that's when the trouble starts to happen, because you get the situation that you can see amongst quite a lot of young people today, where they can't see and they can't tell what's the right way to go because they can't feel anything anymore, and they just rely on external information, and they get into these kind of things where they have to debate everything, or they have to look at both sides of the equation mentally and investigate it, because the deeper, more visceral aspect of themselves that plugs in through primal instinct and raw knowing is no longer operating to the degree that it did in previous generations.
Good question. Really good question.
Yeah.
So this is like one of those tip questions, but it's kind of phrased quite nicely. So how can we work on embodying love and creating this new world around us while also dealing with the chaos in the world around us? Crazy times, crazy behavior. And how do we create as much peace and safety in our environment for positive growth? Tips.
You're not working on anything. And you're not here to create the new world. This is not the Protestant Reformation where you've got to work your way into heaven. You're already doing it. The point of focus is your vigilance around not letting anything else get in the way of that natural current that you already have, that flows quite dynamically if you don't interfere with it. And so this time especially is so valuable, isn't it? Because it's showing you all the things you are really sure are not who you are and not what you want. And you are guarding against making sure that you do not adopt or take up any of those behaviors or ways of being, so that you are the one who stays in control of your own reality. That is the tip. You are staying entrained on who you are and not allowing anything else to take that over.
How will the process be for people with a mental handicap? There's a lady here who says she has a daughter with Down syndrome. I'm wondering how the process will affect her.
Sure, it will actually be much easier, because as is so often the case, where there might be less infrastructure in one area of the personal field, there will always be more highly developed infrastructure in another aspect. And as we grow into all of ourselves and all of our multidimensional being becomes online in this reality, those things actually will not be in the way so much, to the degree that they are in whatever that individual situation is. And actually that lens, if you like, which prevents a certain type of reality, will be quite useful, because it will not be able to take on any more of what's going in that old on that old reality level anymore, because it can't compute it anyway, and it never did.
There's a good one here, Jacqueline, about the New World Again, and what healing will look like. What alternative healing modalities will there be? Will there still be hands-on healing, energy work, acupuncture? What will medicine look like in this new reality?
There'll always be those things where they're being used in integrity by people with real skills and real ability. But the majority of healing modalities will disappear in the more external layers of the world while everything is getting sorted out, because it will be forbidden. And in many societies in the world now, we're moving into a more socialist dystopian reality. And those things are always closed down by authoritarian forces. Those alternative modalities will flourish on the inner levels, and those who are able to materialize those inner worlds in the locations where they live. But the age of the celebrity healer and the celebrity culture in general, where it's more about the person who's doing the things and having the skills than actually about the skills themselves, all of that is going to disappear. And as people are realizing, a lot of that world is simply not what it's cracked up to be. There'll be a lot of people going out of business, fairly and unfairly. But you can really never lose what nature still permits through its own world order. It will just come back in a different, more powerful way through a different setting, particularly through art, aesthetic, creativity, and things that require the mind less. A lot of our spiritual and alternative health modalities have become infected by an intellectualism which requires them to validate and to prove and to demonstrate and to evidence. And quite a lot of the healing community have become very caught up in those kinds of practices. All of that's going to disappear, and a new way of expressing those things will come back. And those healers and practitioners who are already open to that new, much more elastic type of reality will simply be able to reinvent themselves and present themselves even more powerfully in the world, sometimes without any words at all, with music and many other different types of visual and aesthetic presentation, which do far more than the previous set of techniques that they used.
Here's a good question, because we spoke about it actually, Jacqueline, before we came on. Dear Jacqueline, I'm thankful for a growing and beautiful community, yet in Melbourne we are holding an international sportsman hostage, seemingly as an example, and kids between 5 to 11 are due for their medicalization any day. Is the tipping point close?
Yeah. It's a very interesting situation, isn't it? I mean, if you are an authoritarian force, you know, you really are shooting yourself in the foot by confining someone and showing the whole world in a very obvious fashion exactly who you are and the way that you behave. I don't know much about the situation that you're describing, but what I can tell you is that when you hold to ransom an aspect of reality that is legitimate and a person who has a legitimate right to be and do who they are, the whole world sees it on a certain level. And if that person is famous and it's flashed up all over the world through the media, the whole of the world is only going to wake up faster. I mean, you have to be a real dumbass to actually adopt a kind of strategy like that, don't you?
So Novak, yeah, Novak is kind of our Neo at the moment. He's a bit of a Neo. I'm not into the savior buzz. We're not going that way. But Novak, fair play to you.
There has to
Amazing.
be so many nodes of reality now cropping up, which are showing in stark reality this imposition and inversion of what is seen and what is hidden, because it's the nature of the reality of the new world now that anything that doesn't quite match up is getting exposed. And because things are moving so fast, it will happen at a universal global level. And then there's another switch and humanity will move up to the next level. And when you're talking about sports personalities and when you're talking about activities that all of us either like to watch or do or to know about, then the transition of consciousness out of impurity into more purity is happening in a flash in those types of circumstances. And it's not just a tipping point. It's just like an opening of the floodgates, really, for more and more realization of what's happening, and also for that primal force of humanity to no longer be held back, and the cry for freedom will grow even stronger.
Beautiful. Somebody wrote in here, Novak, Novaks. I like it. I like it. We'll change his name. Okay. So, Jacqueline, here's a question. People are, and a lot of people ask this, why are some people having death after the V? Some people becoming very ill, others, they don't even have one reaction even after 3 jabs. And why have politicians no reactions from this gene therapy? Are there unequal charges? When, yes, why?
Well, there are so many answers to that question. It really depends on the individual, doesn't it? And it depends on that individual's frequency. Some people can actually, walk through the middle of a room with so much happening and they will have no effect whatsoever because their frequency is on a completely different level. And then there are some people actually whose vibration is so coarse that it all just bounces off of them. And they can blunder through reality for a very long time. And then suddenly, almost as a shock, that all falls apart when there's a switch in the overall frequency of a dimension and they just go out of existence immediately. Some people are naturally taking on the frequencies around them. They burn up in the integrity of their purity and they exhibit mild symptoms, and then everything disappears. It doesn't really touch the core of them. Some people really are affected, and in some people's cases, of course, there are a set of biological events that take place, and then they suffer illness and in some cases death as well, because they don't have a frequency immunity, not a biological immunity, a frequency immunity to what is inside them. If you don't have frequency immunity, you cannot have biological immunity. It's impossible.
And there are, Jacqueline, people who lead big communities and they have to travel and they're saying they have to get it because of those reasons. And I looked a bit deeper into some of that because some of those people were people I really appreciated their work. And the feedback I got was, well, I know how to remove this. I'm a healer. I can remove this. Do you buy into that one?
Show me. I didn't answer the last bit of your last question. Just let me go back.
Yeah,
You
the
asked
politician.
about the politicians.
Mm-hmm.
Well, you know, maybe it's taking some of them a long time to, you know, get their intervention, and they haven't actually taken it. Maybe some of them have, and they have very strong bodies. Maybe some of them have an antidote and they do take it. There's all types of scenarios. Some people can take it and have little effect, and other people can take it and have more effect. And that leads on into your next question. Oh, yes, there are all sorts of people who say all sorts of things until the moment that they get ill and then they die. These are all, you know, big claims. But can they actually furnish them? And we all know, you know, I refer to it sometimes as the cult of the annoying shaman, or, you know, celebrity healers who claim this or that. And then the next minute something happens and it's not quite the way that we thought it was. We need to be very careful before we make these claims. But ultimately, nature decides these things and also shows the truth of the matter to everyone. Humility is always a good sign in these situations.
Yeah, and somebody's mentioning here in the comments that they had heard there were some studies where there were difference in batches and things like that. I mean, you
I
probably
think that's
don't
correct.
want, yeah, you don't want the leader of a country getting an injection and dropping down the next day. You want to keep him alive. So maybe there's some saline going on here. Yeah.
Who knows what the crazy rationale is behind the people who have dreamt up all of this ridiculous stuff. But it's certainly true that there are different batches, and there are control batches as well with different labels. And of course, there are some interventions which have nothing in them as well. And, you know, if you're a very accomplished person, you'll know the difference anyway. So.
Yeah, in our last chat, someone is citing back to the last chat that we had and saying that you stated on the day, I think it was the 3rd or the 12th that we last spoke, the linear timeline was another 14 to 15 months of extreme difficulty. And no governments by 2027, 28. Has the timeline shifted on today's date?
For sure. I think there's no governments already, but people don't realize it. And it's been that way really officially for a good number of months. I mean, the governments, actually, all of them have been terminated. Not all of them even realize it yet. But with the switch to the new financial system that really started properly just a couple of months ago, governments and the leaders have been axed, and everybody really who acts with them, but they just don't know yet. And they're going to find that they're on the scrap heap just as much as everybody else soon. Good luck with that.
The blame patterns that are coming up in families that people are having their talk. I mean, this is a question that covers a lot of people. My medicalized family is angry and trying to guilt trip me for not getting the V, so I'm allowed to fly over to see my dear paralyzed dying dad after he had a stroke caused by the booster. So how to stop these blame patterns in families, how to deal with family members who are putting pressure on you. What should people do there?
You won't stop the blame patterns. They have to burn themselves out, and people have to learn for themselves. And it's really, really horrible, isn't it? The pain that you can feel at the ostracization. I know that a lot of people are comparing this situation at the moment to what the Jews went through in the Holocaust. And they're trying to remind people that segregation and division leads only to more pain, seemingly to no avail in some cases. Blame patterns, just like any pattern that does not serve us, in the end, they run out of food. And they do consume those who are willing to partake in them, which is very painful to go through as well. But in the end, the nature of patterns which are unleashed or have, if you like, an origin in that other source that's on the planet, the nature of that other source is to self-destruct. Because the nature of replication, which is seemingly 100%, is that in the end, it can only live out of its own self. And if there's nothing left there to feed on, then in the end, there's nowhere else to go but to replicate the end of its own self, which is where all of that is heading. So just do your best, because that's all you do every single day, and keep on doing it, and hold firm and join with more people who are of the same likeness to your own self as far as you can. You will get through, and this will end.
Thank you for that question. Thank you. That would help a lot of people. Jacqueline, this is coming up in the comments a bit. People are asking what will happen with mortgages when the financial system changes.
Well, it's a bit like all the banking stuff, we were talking about earlier. When you come to the end of a system where, more food source is needed by a small group, they make a grab for everything. So, that's why there's all this rumors of, your bank account being ended. And, if we're all going to be permanent renters because we don't own anything and nothing belongs to us anymore, then it sounds to me like mortgages are becoming increasingly obsolete. But whatever the truth of that matter, the deeper truth is that you're a sovereign being, sovereign unto your own self, not even to any law movement or even any set of codes outside of the legal system as stands currently. First and foremost, you are sovereign unto your own self. That is where your mortgage gets paid. So pay into that bank account every day, and then your mortgage will sort itself out. You will get that knowing or that feeling or that sign, or something will come up to show you what to do. Because the root of your mortgage, and even the root of the slave self that pays the mortgage, because of course only a slave self would pay a mortgage, the root of all of that is crumbling anyway. And as that dies away, you'll find in the end that it's impossible to go along with those things because something else comes along to replace it. And then that's where you can exercise your choice and your free will about what happens next.
And it leads nicely into the next question regarding the whole kind of debt, and obviously the slave self as well is around debt. And I think the translation of mortgage is actually debt, isn't there? Something like that. Or the American Federation is in the process of reacquiring stolen American assets and freeing American citizens and nationals from debt slavery. Would you comment on this effort in light of the looming financial crash and reset? Will it succeed?
I really, really hope so. Just like I really, really hope about all those types of positive statements that have been made over and over again in the last few years. I really, really hope they are true. And meanwhile, I'm going to answer to my own self and obey the very highest rationales in my own being to support whatever that movement is, to whatever extent it's operating, and to support my own self and all others who wish to operate in the same way.
Great question. Thank you for that. There's a little bit here on extraterrestrials, and that the person is saying that you share that extraterrestrials are not high frequency beings. I'm particularly curious how you interpret those who claim to be abducted and have hybrid children. Is this Stockholm syndrome, or are they simply making it up? And what of the Galactic Federation? Okay, so a big ET question for you.
Oh God, not the Galactic Federation again. They keep coming out, don't they? Okay, let's use the word humanoids rather than extraterrestrials, so we get ourselves a bit more into the plane of reality rather than mind programming and mind influencing through the media. Okay. There are many, many humanoids. Some are above surface, some are interdimensional, some can move through time, And there are many that would like to get in who can't, who are being invited in as well. So the Galactic Federation is a reference to that non-physical consciousness outside this reality, apparently guiding us all, that may or may not have access to the non-physical realms of our own selves that we can receive through our own body system. You can call it whatever you like, as long as you don't start turning it into a savior complex, as Paul has just been referring to several times today in the broadcast, and as long as you don't give your power away to it. Ultimately, everything that you can't experience directly in this reality is second to everything you can experience in this reality, and you have healthy control over yourself. Is there life on this planet other than our own? Well, of course there is. And there has been for a very, very long time, millennia and millennia. And it's all coming out, and it will come out for those who have the ears to listen. And positive and negative varieties of humanoids have been here all the way through and are sitting right next to you on the bus and on the subway every single day.
They're on the bus.
Except you can't tell because they've got something over the face. Yeah.
They're the ones not wearing the masks. Okay.
Some of them, yeah.
Some of them, yeah. So we're in the year 22, okay, the number 22. Is there any significant portals this year, time portals, time stamps that we should pay attention to? One that's kind of doing the rounds at the moment is 22 to 22, the 22nd of February, 2022. Do you buy into any of that? Is there any significant dates?
No. April and August are important this year. There's more opportunity for you to throw off everything that's enslaving you if you choose to take that opportunity. It's up to you. Even the influence of supermoons now is nothing besides the unparalleled ability of the human being to seize the day and to make this world the way that you want it to be. There's absolutely nothing stopping anyone except the weight of your own mind and the fear that is being beamed at you. You will find that if you push outwards into reality and you decide to make things a certain way, that although you will meet resistance, you will be successful.
There's one here on pharma. Dear Jacqueline, I am working at Big Pharma. I lost faith in Western medicine already some time ago. I realized that already some time ago and was asking my source connection for guidance, but instead I was offered another pharma job. What should I do?
Well,
don't take the job.
You will always be offered in external reality the option where you have the least and the most power in perfect combination to discern where you need to make the strongest adjustment in your life. I'm going to let that sink in for a minute, because I know that for a lot of you, your head just went a bit scrambled. When something turns up on the outside as a possibility or an opportunity, it's not either good or bad. It is a blend of the purity and the impurity of your own consciousness, plus other factors which are nothing to do with you. So everything on the outside is not a 100% perfect mirror of who you are inside. It is a mix of what is not you and what is you, and the bit that is you is a mixture of your own purity and impurity. And when we need to take control of more of our multidimensional selves, what happens is that often when we self-reference and then ask for something to come into our lives, we get shown the same thing again that we've already got, even bigger, because the universe says to us through the lens of our own source connection, because it's a projection that comes back through the mirror of our own selves, it's you and where you already are that you need to decide about. Stop looking for another formula. Look at the one you've already got. Register what's pure and impure about it for your own self, and then choose again. That's why that came back for you even bigger, because it was your own deeper self saying to you, there's something that you've missed about your current situation that you need to decide about. Once you really go into that deeply and find the part of your own self that you're not living yet, and it's all hooked up in that job you've already got, then you'll easily find the answer about whether you need to stay or go. That's why it just blows up bigger, to keep you in your current situation, because it's so perfect to give you the answer that you already know. And in your case, actually, the person asking this question, you're a real rebel, and you have to be very careful sometimes that you don't throw the baby out with the bathwater. This time you're making a decision from that deeper place inside yourself where you feel nourished only for yourself instead of for others. And that's the way you need to go in your life in general. What really deeply nourishes me and the quality of my own existence right now? That's what you're being asked to look at.
Brilliant. Thank you. Thank you for that question. Okay, this is a nice one. Dear Jacqueline, to the best of my ability, I take responsibility for my actions, my thoughts, and my emotions, which is so much clearer. I notice them as they arise. Beautiful to have that distance. My question is, how much are we all responsible for what is happening in the world? Thank you.
We are responsible for our own selves, of course, and what we do and what we say, even if sometimes we do and we say things unconsciously that we feel that we can't control. And then there is also this other factor in the world, which we're not responsible for directly, because we weren't there or we weren't even born at that time. But nevertheless, we have the responsibility now to make new decisions about what is happening, because we are the ones who are alive and in the body with the say. So we do have responsibility over everything that happens, but we are not the direct cause or to blame for everything that is happening in the world. And this is often the suggestion that it's all about our miserable, impoverished selves, and therefore we must have all of our freedom taken away because we are not safe or not even worthy of those freedoms anymore because we are corrupting and damaging the world. No, there is a small group of highly advanced beings in a certain narrow sense in this world who are destroying the world and attempting to take it over. That is about them. It is not about anybody else except them. And then the question becomes, when we take responsibility for the fact that we do know it's actually happening, what are we going to do about it? Are we going to accept it? Are we going to reject it? Or are we going to go to that deeper level where we purify and bring on more of our own multidimensional selves through positioning ourselves in the vicinity of a marker of high frequency integrity and purity, and push that out into the world, so that starts to then sort out that other problem, and we only become more and more powerful at exercising our own spontaneity and sovereign right to live the way that we wish to.
A question here in the chat box, in the chat from Pauline. She's asking, can you please say more about splicing with interdimensional beings and how that actually happened?
I will say a little, but I'm not going to say so much because I do not wish to start pushing people's attention in directions that we don't really need to go too far. Essentially, all splicing begins with an idea that is conceived outside of this reality in a non-physical realm. And that idea, which has a very particular frequency, a weight and a signature, is then pushed into this reality such that it turns up in the mind or the world of a being who has a biological source connection and is present in this reality. And slowly what happens is that human being then begins to accept that thought as their own and think it's actually them. And that thought then has more success at replicating itself and growing further through its own algorithm. And then slowly you have a splicing together of the thought, the interdimensional being behind the thought, and the human being with the biological apparatus. Eventually what happens is that one is literally able to live inside the other. The interdimensional force is able to inhabit the human being, and the two live in a very unhappy marriage together in this reality, one inside the other. And eventually the source connection apparatus gets biologically broken or disconnected, and then future generations are born with a different type of source connection to previous ancestors.
Thank you for that question. This person is saying that you don't really talk about Asian countries except maybe China. Any reason for that? Does it mean that you feel everyone living there will die, even if they are technology free? Okay, that's a bit heavy, but yeah.
No, that's not the reason.
We're not going to announce that tonight. Okay.
I don't talk about certain areas of the world at the moment for a very specific reason, and that's because there is a precise timing for that. And then when it suddenly comes into view, there will be a whole layer of information, knowledge, and frequency attached to that information and knowledge, which is very rich and deep, which everybody is starting to compute on the next level of their journey of embodying more love on this planet. The wealth of circuitry, ancient ways of being that are held in various races on Earth is inestimable and will come more and more online in the future years. And believe me, I will be mentioning all of those places more and more and more in time to come. At the moment, the focus is so much on the so-called battlefront, where democracy is being surrendered for totalitarianism, so-called democracy, and where the origins of a lot of the aggression actually started geographically on the planet.
Another question here, Jacqueline. The New World seems rather lonely. There's not many people here. Does the New World have a lot less people? Most people I know are sound asleep, and they are even agents for the old world. I don't like going out or dealing with them anymore. So does the New World feel lonely?
Get used to it. But you know, what's going to happen is that in your loneliness, because we've all been feeling very lonely, haven't we? Even if we're lucky enough to be in proximity with loved ones. What's going to happen is that you're going to die so completely into your own source connection, not physically die. You're going to die in a way that really you've never experienced on every level into your own source connection, that you're being reborn into a place where there's full interconnection and you can never be lonely. And that's what's necessary. Sometimes you have to back out of the cul-de-sac that you've gone down in order to experience the fullness of yourself. And the reversal of certain situations is literally the headlong falling sometimes into somewhere that we don't really want to go, so that we can meet our own selves fully again and nobody else. That's the way we purify. And there's a lot of wisdom in that, you know, old expression that you have to completely die to something to be reborn.
Mm-hmm. person asking here in the chat box again, if we are multidimensional, does this mean we also come from the future?
Yes, of course. Everybody comes from the future. Maybe not quite as consciously and full-bodied as myself, but everybody is from the future to a certain extent. They're also from the past as well, but these days more from the future than the past.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so the purification process, Jacqueline, that a lot of people are involved in, what are the best? I mean, is it just a case of enrolling in it, or can you do it yourself? Can you activate your own purification space?
Yeah, get the course, sign up, get your certificate, graduate. Everybody's purifying, whether they realize it or not.
Mm-hmm.
But there is a fundamental difference between deciding I can do it all myself and off you go and you do it all yourself, and doing it all on the frequency that you are, and joining with a higher frequency that actually you already have the capacity to take on, and taking a kind of fast track and doing it yourself. You're already enrolled in your own program of purification. And you've been doing that for so long, actually, you're only just beginning to realize that's what's been going on. So what you're doing when you're, say, joining the external purification space is that you're just meeting up with everybody who you've been aligned with for so long, but you hadn't realized. And that's not really an enrollment. It's a joining in the sense that, yes, you're joining up with people on a certain level of consciousness where you haven't joined before, but it's a regrouping and it's a materialization and a gathering of what's been there for a long time. If you're asking more practically about joining the work that I offer and things like that, then the answer is very straightforward. You don't have to if you don't want to. You can go it alone, and you will do that all by yourself. You'll go much slower, but that's fine. You can do it that way if you wish, or you can do that in the proximity of a supportive ecosystem and environment where you don't lose your own self and you never have to extricate yourself from anyone or anything else, because you never got intermingled with or mixed up with anything or anyone else. You only connect more deeply into your own self, truly, in the purification space. And then you just go on the website and you join the reboot group first. And then you start listening to the tracks that get sent, as well as the purification that starts to intensify and become more conscious for you. And by the way, the purification tracks are just a report and a mirror back to you of where you actually are and always were. Don't misunderstand. A purification track does not do something to you. What happens is you do something to yourself such that you then drop the physical, emotional, mental, and spiritual layers that have been getting in the way because they've been hooked up with the slave self.
The new beautiful babies that are being born onto the planet right now, Jacqueline, are they coming in with the slave self deleted? Are they an upgraded being? What is the story with the new beings arriving here at the moment?
So many of them don't have the infrastructure of the slave self. And that is why I always say that that generation are going to be pretty harsh and tough. And that's the new love on the block. You know, there's a weak spiritual strain of human being on the planet who insists on having everything loving and is not able to compute harshness or toughness, and actually makes out that it's wrong or something that shouldn't happen. They're in for a shock with these new kids on the block, because these new kids are going to judge all of us very harshly in the future and say, what the fuck were you doing? Talking about light and love when the planet was being handed over to its own death and demise. These beings are highly advanced. They know the practical solutions to cleaning up the planet, but they also know the practical solutions to cleaning up unhealthy forms of consciousness that are hanging around on the planet. These beings see clearly. They don't take any prisoners. They know what they have to do, and they're quite prepared to die trying. There's a lot of those beings coming in, and they're really spiritual, not this funny type of spirituality that is all huggy and wishy-washy, but would never stand up for anything or anyone. In fact, would run in the opposite direction.
Hardcore. I like it. Yeah, hang out with some babies. Get some babies around. They've got a new software coming in. There's a lot of rumors, Jacqueline, about a possible blackout, cyber attacks, all this kind of stuff coming down the track. Is there going to be a cyber blackout, do you feel?
Oh, it's quite likely, I think. I can certainly see the patterns of it, but the patterns are changing all the time. And we have control over those patterns. And even if it does happen, we have a lot of control over what happens if and when that does happen. So really don't start worrying about those things too much. In fact, those worries and those potentialities are always a great kick up the ass to make sure that you're really on target with what it is that you want to do, making sure that you're living your life like each day is your last, and that you're not capitulating to agendas that you don't need to, or doing things that don't really matter anymore. So be pragmatic, be sensible, but never capitulate to fear.
Yeah, we spoke about this a bit earlier, about that feeling of trusting that, not even trusting, just becoming multidimensional, knowing it's there for you when you need it.
Yes.
Any fear or worry, it's not relevant right now.
We've learned to live with fear and worry for a long time now, right? And actually, we're all still here, most of us anyway. And actually, we're better for it. Remember that even trauma is only confined to the physical, emotional, mental, and spiritual levels of your being. Your source connection wiring, meanwhile, is trained on pure love exclusively. And the more of that comes forward, the rest of that other stuff naturally gets sorted out. And with the biological settings of the planet changing, particularly for the structure of the human body, a lot of the trauma being sustained will not actually be lodged deeply in the memory in the future in the way that perhaps it has in past generations. That doesn't mean that you can legitimate, avoidance behaviors or, accept things that are going on because nobody will remember in the future. Of course not. But what I'm saying is that these fears and these technologies which are injecting fear literally into your mind substance on a daily basis, they cannot penetrate into the depths of you, and you have the power to push them out and transmute them if you are clear that that's what you want to do.
There's a person here, Jacqueline, who said that she's had a lot of psychic attacks over the last few months, woken in the night by faces appearing in her mind's eye, and gets a fright, feels her energy being sucked, sends them off, uses sage and protects herself, but they keep coming back. What to do? Of
course they keep coming back, because the methods that are being used are accepting and rejecting them. And so it sets up an energetic cycle that those things can then feed off of and power themselves off of more. Been saying this for a long time now, but it needs to be said over and over again, I think. Because the death space is now blended with this reality, there's so many non-physical energies who are appearing in your mind's eye because they've got nowhere else to go. They need you. They're not actually trying to attack you. It feels like that because they need your energy to survive. It's a compliment, actually. They can't harm you. And the fear that actually you feel is actually the movement of your being as your source connection powers up to materialize more love on a higher frequency level, so that more of you steps in, which then naturally burns them off. But what happens is, because of the intrusion and because of all of the interception that's going on through technological programs and through mind control and through socialization in our society, we then fall into a fear frequency and a conditioning where we think that there's something wrong with us, or that we have to save them and do something about them. That more religious mindset where we have to hang out for every last person. And then what we do is we downgrade our frequency into helping or repelling or protecting. And really, protection is a completely other definition. Protection is more about embodying your full signature, so nothing else is actually able to step in, and changing up to the next level in line with that frequency, which is already powering up inside you and taking you there, and making sure that nothing else persuades you to go in any other direction. So they are spirits, is one of the words that gets used in the old world. They are the discorporated shell matter of slave self apparatus that has now dismantled. They're not people. They're not entities. They are just discarded energy forms that are dying and already on their way out. And they're trying to knock on your door because they need your help. And the challenge there is to not fall into that dialogue, to tax them with silence, as someone once said, and to take that as the cue to embody more of your own infrastructure, and then that influence will sort itself out. Otherwise, you just pipeline all of your energy directly into that frequency, and you change yourself down onto that frequency, and you start functioning there with them. And you get involved in a drama where you're constantly being attacked, constantly having to protect yourself, constantly needing to find new ways to repel, because you've already accepted the fact that they're a part of your reality.
We are coming close now. We have about 9 minutes to go. There's a question here that is, this is a fun kind of question. Dear OG, I've just re-listened to your 3 Earth Histories tracks. The content covered seems to share similarities to some of the content discussed in the Marvel film Doctor Strange. Is it a coincidence that you strongly resemble the Ancient One?
It must be. I haven't seen those films. I asked someone about what that was recently when they mentioned that film. Apparently some avatar of eternity or something. I don't really like the word avatar very much, but of course all of these images, positive or negative, they can be used to remind yourself about the potentiality of your own self. Best to go in that direction with that kind of thing.
And just on the whole, the movies that we see, and we spoke about the Matrix earlier, is there a higher consciousness? Like, there's a lot of programming. I really see it now when you watch things like Netflix and different movies that is coming through into our consciousness. I presume there's also a higher truths and consciousness coming through this artistic space as well. Do you feel that?
Yes, this is a very checkered area. And I think, you know, on a very somber note, I want to, you know, issue perhaps a warning. We really don't need those types of realities anymore to inform us about who we are. And those things can bury themselves so deeply in your consciousness now that splicing that someone else asked about earlier can happen in a second when you partake in too much of that type of material. You don't need to learn about yourself or what's going to happen through the distorted mirrors that some idiot may have dreamed up as a way to signal to humanity the next stage of what some force has got planned for all of humanity. And we don't even need it as a positive way of informing us who we are. We've already got our own apparatus to tell us who we are, positively and negatively. We need to use that. In the future, a possible positive future, people start to take that technology and turn it on itself, turn it on its head, so that we project outwards literally into universes and beyond, the exact opposite of the signal that's being beamed at us, and we collapse negative realities in every dimension. That's the only use that stuff has now, as an inverse mirror of what is not necessary and of who we are not. There's also a trajectory that some places have gone into in the future who have accepted more of what's happening, similar to what's going on this planet at the moment, where you have to start to sign in to watch those types of programs in order to actually qualify for your food rations and for your ability to even function in your society. So you receive your daily dose of mind programming. That's a potential thing that can be queued up and lined up if we continue to engage in those types of realities beyond a certain point. Is that what you want? Or do you want to create your own media content with your own signal in it that has not been hijacked by those types of realities? These large advertising campaigns, concerts, worldwide traveling razzmatazzes of goodness knows what, a lot of them are being hijacked so that large crowds together can be simultaneously implanted with all sorts of suggestion and technology which can take over your body very, very quickly. Be careful. I'm not saying that all of that stuff is that way, but that is how one step leads to another, down pathways that we really don't need to go down.
Yes, watch what you consume all the time now. And nice to have the cat in the background.
Yes, someone's come to see
out.
me. I don't know who they are, but welcome.
So, Jacqueline, we come to the last few minutes. We have about 4 minutes. I'm getting the feeling that it would be nice if we spent the next 4 minutes. Maybe you give us a rallying call. Maybe you take us into a little purification space for the last 4 minutes, whatever you feel.
Well, of course, I have been taking you into a purification space all the way through, but we can go a little deeper in that if this cat will allow me to. But perhaps the cat has a much better voice on all of this than I do. You are love. I keep on saying it. Love is soft and love is strong. Relax. Let your full self come forward. Say no. You might be surprised what happens. The future is very, very positive. Let no one tell you anything else. And when you see the things that are going on in the world, use that to decide what you will allow physically. You've been brilliant, Paul.
Always a pleasure. And I just want to say thank you, everybody, for tuning in. It's been beautiful to have you. Jacqueline is a person I think I'll have to check in with every so often and have these conversations as we rally together and go through this beautiful, beautiful transformation that we're all going through. And thank you, Jacqueline, for being one of the people steering the ship. We love you. And the love I see here for you is just pouring out in the comments. And from Ireland as well, there's been so many people talking about you over here. We send you so much love. Thank you, folks, and take care. We'll see you next time. We send you so much love. And yeah, this will be obviously recorded, so it will be available afterwards as well. Thank you, Jacqueline. So much love. Thank you.
See you soon.
Cheers. Bye-bye.